Welcome to the Difficile Reporting November Learning Virtual Lab Conference Call. My name is Sylvia and I will be your operator for today's call. At this time, all participants in a listen-only mode. Later, we will conduct a question-and-answer session. I will now turn the call over to Sarah Brickman. Sarah, you may begin.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first virtual learning lab. We are so glad that you've joined us today, and we're looking forward to starting this next phase of the initiative and hope that you are too. A couple of housekeeping items to kick us off. Hopefully you've received notification from your state contact regarding the availability of slides for this call, as well as our hot off the press C. difficile reporting guide. Links to both of these are also posted in the chat box, and we'll be viewing the website where they're hosted as well later on. The content of each of these calls each of those documents, are very similar. Our hope is that you'll find which one works best for your learning style and use it to support you during this and future data reporting periods. We'd greatly appreciate any feedback you can offer on these resources as we work together to best meet your needs. We'll stop multiple times during today's call to allow time for questions over the phone, but please feel free to use the chat box throughout to ask questions, ask for a step or process to be repeated, or to request that I slow down. I know I have a tendency to talk fast. This call is for you, so please help us make it as useful as possible. Finally, as with all of our previous webinars, when you close out of today's event, you will automatically be redirected to an evaluation. Please take a moment to provide us feedback. Upon completing the evaluation, you'll receive a certificate of attendance for your records. By the time we're done today, our hope is that many of you will have completed data submission for the month of October. For those of you who aren't quite ready to submit your data, we believe you'll still find this webinar useful, as we'll be providing a live demo of how to submit data within NHSN. As the objectives indicate, at the end of today's call, you'll know how to access your facility's NHSN account, check your facility setup within NHSN, and submit both C. difficile lab ID events and your monthly summary data. Before we jump into the presentation, one thing we wanted to note, NHSN sent out a notification earlier this week regarding the delayed deployment of NHSN version 8.6. Some of you have reached out with questions about what this means for you. Please note that the updated version of NHSN will only affect information and data submitted for 2017 and beyond, so data entered for 2016 is not impacted. Just note that you will not be able to enter any information for 2017, including updated annual surveys or reporting plans, until after the new version has been deployed, which is now scheduled for January 7th. We'll send out reminders closer to this time as well. It's not something that you need to worry about currently, but we did just want to note that as some of you have had questions. Okay, so on for our task for today. A few reminders of things that you must do before you can actually go through the data submission process. Obviously, your facility must be enrolled in NHSN. We know that you've all been working on that diligently, and we really appreciate your continued commitment to getting into the system. Before you can submit any data, you must map your facility locations and submit your monthly reporting plan, and we'll be reviewing those two activities again today. We'll also encourage you to add additional users from your facility to NHSN. Really, this is about sharing the love and getting some support from your colleagues. It's helpful to have more than one person who knows how the system works, and it also ensures continuity of practice even if one person isn't available. You've heard from us many times about joining the required groups for the project, one at the national level and one at the state level. Guides that walk step by step through this process are available on the Lake Superior QIN website, and we're going to be looking at that webpage in a moment. And finally, you have to collect the data before you can submit it, which requires following the NHSN protocol. So a few key points from the protocol. You know that you're reporting on C. difficile cases. More specifically, these are non-duplicate C. difficile positive laboratory assays obtained from residents who are receiving care at your facility. When you enter a case, it has to be linked to the specific location within the facility where the patient was residing at the time the specimen was collected. Only positive results from specimens collected from currently admitted residents should be reported. So if the lab results were collected prior to the resident being admitted, those should not be reported. And you must monitor the entire facility, which is represented in NHSN by the phrase FAC-wide in. I know this has been confusing to a few people because of the "in" at the end of the phrase, which is usually used to describe inpatient facilities, but NHSN is using fac-wide "in" here to refer to surveillance facility-wide within long-term care facilities as well. A few definitions to note. We've talked about these before, but just as a review, a CDI positive laboratory assay is a positive lab test result for C. diff, toxin A and or B, and a toxin-producing C. diff organism detected in the stool specimen by culture or other laboratory means. This is slightly different than a CDI lab ID event, which is defined as a non-duplicate C. difficile positive lab assay tested on liquid or watery stool samples and obtained while the resident is receiving care at your facility. We had a question on our last webinar that spurred some follow-up on our end. The question was related to the underlined words in the definition of CDI lab ID event, liquid or watery stool sample. So the question was, what if the test comes back positive, but the sample doesn't meet this definition? And we had to reach out to NHSN, and to be honest, they needed to do some digging on their end as well to come up with a solid answer to this. In the end, their answer was that a documented formed stool does not meet the criteria for a CDI lab ID event, but the key word here is documented. If it isn't documented that the stool was formed, the assumption is that it wasn't and therefore meets the definition of a lab ID event. Most labs have a rejection policy in place and won't accept samples that don't meet the guidelines. If your lab has such a policy in place, you can assume that any positive results came from appropriate specimens. If they don't have a rejection policy in place, we would encourage you to have further conversations with them and encourage that such a policy be instated. Your state contacts can assist you with resources to aid in that discussion if you're interested. We also just want to point out that this is an opportunity not only for you to connect with your lab, but also to educate your staff and providers regarding proper testing for C. difficile. If the patient's stool does not conform to the shape of the container, it should not be sent for C. difficile testing in order to avoid false positives. One additional definition that we wanted to point out, which is very important, is that you are only to report non-duplicate positive CDI lab ID events. So what is a duplicate? A duplicate is a positive C. difficile result for a patient who had a positive within the last 14 days. We'll walk through an example of this in a moment, but note that we encourage you to create a log of positive CDI results in order to be able to track on this aspect of reporting. So this is a nice short flow chart that lays out the process of determining whether or not to report a C. difficile event. You get a positive CDI test result, assuming that the sample was appropriate and conforming to the shape of the container. And at that point, the question to ask is, did the same patient have a positive result within the last 2 weeks? If the answer is yes, the case would be considered a duplicate and therefore should not be reported. If the answer is no, the patient has not had a positive result in the past 2 weeks, then the case is a non-duplicate and therefore considered a reportable CDI lab ID event. You've seen a chart like this similar before. Want to walk through it again. The duplicate concept can be a little bit confusing, and this is why we encourage you to create a log for your CDI events. Note that the definition of a duplicate doesn't say that the patient had a reportable CDI lab event in the last 2 weeks, just that they had a positive test. So let's just walk through this example. A patient is tested on January 3rd, and the result is positive. The patient has not had a positive test in the prior 14 days, and therefore this is a non-duplicate and should be entered as a CDI lab ID event. 6 days later, the patient is tested again, and the result is positive. It's been less than 14 days since the patient was tested with a positive result, so this would be a duplicate case and would not be reported. The patient is then tested on January 20th. This is 17 days after the first positive, but only 11 days since the last positive result, so this again would be a duplicate case and would not be reported. Similarly, 9 days later, the patient is tested again, and although this is 26 days from the first test, It's only 9 days since the most recent positive in the series, and therefore is a duplicate and would not be reported. The final test in this example is from February 23rd, which is more than 14 days after the most recent positive, making it a non-duplicate event that would be reported. Okay, from here we're going to go out into demo mode. The slides are arranged to mirror what we're going to walk through. Again, please use the chat box to indicate if I'm moving too fast or if you'd like me to repeat something. And my colleagues here will let me know to go back or to slow down. And please also bear with me. I'm presenting and demoing at the same time, so if I'm a little bit clunky, I apologize. So to get things started, I'm going to share my screen. And we're actually going to go in reverse order of what's on the slides, starting off by going out to the CDI page on the Lake Superior QIN website. Wanted to show you some of the resources that are available for you here, and we'll continue to populate this page as we go forward in the initiative. In the center of the screen, you'll see a description of the initiative, the C. Difficile initiative, and then scrolling down is where the bulk of the resources exist. So the first one is our newest resource, which is our C. Difficile reporting guide. This is intended to be a desk reference for you. So walking step by step through the data submission process, we encourage you to print it out. It is useful to print it in color if you're able. Make notes in it. Let us know if there's anything missing that you think would be helpful or anything that requires additional clarification. Then you'll also see links to the first 3 webinars that we hosted as you were getting started in this initiative, enrolling in NHSN and completing that process and setup, and then also when we walked through the initial how to report C. difficile data. The joining group guides that I mentioned are here. Each state has its own guide because each state has its own group that you need to join, so go ahead and review those if you haven't joined the groups yet. And then more information about the virtual learning labs is provided at the bottom so that you can mark your calendar for those events that are coming up in December and January. Registration for these is required, so if you are looking for the registration links, they are provided at the end of the slides for today. But today's slide handouts are available here on the screen. If you scroll up to the top on the right-hand side, you'll see your state contacts listed here, so you can reach out to us. We're happy to help in any way that we can. We also have some useful links here, the SAMS Help Desk and the NHSN Help Desk, as well as links to a couple of NHSN resources, including the NHSN C. Difficile page and the SAMS login page. And from here, we're actually going to go out to the NHSN C. Difficile page. A few things to note regarding navigation on the NHSN page. Along the left-hand side in the green navigation bar, you'll notice that this helps determine where you are. You can see that we are looking here. This is where we are, the bolded section. You can see that we are looking at information specific to long-term care facilities and the surveillance for C. difficile and MRSA infections. You can also tell where you are by looking at what's called breadcrumbs across the top here. Within CDC, we're on the NHSN webpage, looking at materials for enrolled long-term care facilities, and then this is the title of the actual page that we're on. Similar to how the LSQIN CDI page is set up, resources on the NHSN page can be found in the center, and you can click on each of them to see more. So there are trainings, which includes both YouTube and streaming video links as well as PowerPoint presentations. There are protocols, and we strongly encourage you, and we're going to talk a bit, we just talked a bit already about the event protocol. You should get familiar with this document, probably print it out, highlight sections as you come up against questions. There are data collection forms and instructions for completing them, and we'll talk about this more during the data submission demo, but please note that these are resources that mirror what you'll be asked to submit electronically. You do not have to use these if your facility has a process in place for collecting the necessary information. They are simply intended to be resources. However, the table of instructions that's provided for each, so for the lab ID event form and the denominator form in particular, are going to be very useful for you, and you may wish to print them as resources as well. There's also some supporting materials. In particular here, we'd like to point out the location labels and descriptions, which are helpful when you're doing your location mapping. And finally, the current FAQs that are provided here are very general in nature. Based on how the other settings of care pages are set up, we would expect that in time additional FAQs will be added that will be more specific to the work that you all are doing. So at this point, I just want to take a quick breather to check and see if anyone has any questions. If Annette, if you're on the line, are there any questions in the chat box? I'm going to take the silence to mean no that there aren't. So then at this point, we're going to launch into the demo of how to actually submit your data into NHSN. So in the slide deck here, we've provided the link to the SAMS.cdc.gov, which is where you'll be going to log in. I want to point out that when you're on the NHSN page, the NHSN login link over here will take you out to SAMS.cdc.gov. So you can click there if you'd like, but that's where we landed. So on this page, you'll see 4 options for logging in, and now that you have your grid card, you will always choose the SAMS grid card login option. So we'll click there. On the next page, you'll again be using the SAMS grid card login. And so here you'll enter your SAMS username, which is your email address, and your SAMS password. I'm going to and I managed not to fat finger that, despite a lot of people watching me, which is promising. And then finally, you'll be asked to use your grid card credentials as the last step in the login. So you'll be entering the letter or number that aligns with the column and row combination provided. So here I'm looking for E1, H3, and J4. Oops, sorry. Now this one I'm going to screw up. All right. So now we've landed at the NHSN My Application screen, and my screen here is going to look slightly different than yours. Once you've completed enrollment, if you see the choice between enrolling a facility or NHSN reporting, you're always going to be working in reporting because your facility is enrolled. So we're going to click on NHSN reporting. And this screen is going to look a little different from yours as well. If you only have access to one facility, that facility should be defaulted in the drop-down menu. If you have access to more than one facility, you'll need to select it from the drop-down list. And if long-term care facility isn't the default for component, you'll need to select that as well. My setup is slightly different because we are a quality innovation network and not a facility, but I'm going to select that I'm working in the long-term care component, and then from the facility drop-down list, I'm going to be going into a test facility that's actually been set up for us, and then click Submit. Please note that because I will be in a test facility, there's going to be a lot more information entered than what you're going to see in your facility as we're clicking through the various components. I'll try to remind you of that as we go through it as well, but don't get overwhelmed by the amount of options that I have. Your options are going to be much more limited. So now we're in the facility profile, and we're going to walk through the steps to check facility setup. It is a good idea to check your facility location mapping before entering data to make sure that it's current. If the same person is consistently submitting data, it may not be necessary to do this every month. However, reviewing the location mapping may be particularly helpful for new NHSN users at your facility. So assuming that you've already mapped locations, you can review them by selecting Facility from the left-hand menu, and then selecting Locations from that Facility submenu. You'll see a set of instructions are provided here at the top, and these will guide you based on what you want to do. In this case, we want to look at what's already been created, so we want to find a record. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Find, and this is going to generate a list of all of the locations that have been entered for my facility. Again, I'm in a demo test location, so I have 27 locations that have been mapped. Your facility is not going to have 27 locations. In fact, many of your facilities will only have one location mapped for the entire facility. But what I want to demo here is that you can change these or edit these as needed. So if something changes at your facility, you have the ability to go into your mapped locations, select the location of interest, and make some changes. So the way that you would do that is to actually click on the location in question within the generated list. So in this case, let's say I want to look at what 1 North has mapped. So I'm going to click on 1 North. And if I scroll up to the top, this has now been populated with the information for 1 North, and these fields are editable. So say that 1 North was previously general nursing, but now we're switching it to a dementia unit. I can click here and just change it to dementia unit. Or if we were switching, say we're going to keep it general nursing, but we increased our number of beds from 10 to 15, I can change the number of beds to 15, and then click Save at the bottom. And now 1 North will show as having 15 beds. If you haven't yet mapped your locations, or if you have a new location that needs to be added, you can do so again by selecting Locations from the left-hand menu, and again looking at the instructions at the top. So the first instructions provided are how to add a new location. So you would enter your location code, which is basically how you want to refer to the location. So say I want to enter location XYZ. Your label, if you want to get more specific in how you're describing this location, you can do so using the label function. Otherwise, many people just use the same code and label they use them interchangeably. So I'll do that here and just use XYZ as my label as well. XYZ unit is going to be general nursing. You'll always leave the status default to active, and then my bed size is going to be 10 beds. So after adding that in, I would click on Add, and it would add XYZ as a unit that as a location within our facility. So that takes us through checking your facility locations and adding a new facility location. From there, we would move on to reporting plans, but I want to check to see if anyone has any questions. I'm going to stop sharing here for a moment so we can see. Looks like Kathleen's been fielding some questions in the chat box here. Anything that we should be reviewing again? Any questions at all about the location mapping?
There are no questions in the chat box.
Thanks, Annette. Okay, so we'll go back in. You can see my screen again. I'm still in my NHSN location, and now we're going to be going over the reporting plans. So some facilities choose to set up their reporting plans for the entire calendar year at one time, in which case it's a good idea to check the plan before submitting data to make sure that the plan is current. Other facilities choose to update their reporting plan each month when they begin submitting data, and we'll walk through both of these processes. So you'll start by selecting Reporting Plan from the left-hand menu, and then select Find from the Reporting Plan submenu. If you click on the Find list, similar to what we did under Locations, it will generate a list of all of the reporting plans that have been submitted by your facility. Again, we're in a test facility, so there's a lot of them in here. If you are just reporting for the first time this month, you may not have any in there yet. But the default of this list is to show 10 per page. You can click here to be able to show more. In this case, if I choose 100, I can see all of the reporting plans that have been submitted for this facility. You can also click on the headings to change the sorting methodology, so you can see that currently they're lumped by month and then year. If I wanted to see all of the reporting plans for a year, I could click on year, and now they're sorted by the years that they were submitted. So that's just kind of useful to know that same functionality is available throughout. You'll find that throughout the NHSN facility page. So click on the month that you're interested in reviewing. We're going to be working on October 2016, so I'm going to click on that reporting plan. And you'll see that this populates then what was submitted for October 2016 already. The reporting plan should include at a minimum that we are going to be reporting C. difficile, back wide, and this little checkbox needs to be selected here as well. If you are reporting on urinary tract infections, I know some facilities are using that as well. You can also add that here. You only submit one reporting plan for your facility, and all of that's captured here regardless of how many modules you're tracking on. So if there was an error here, I could select Edit, again, from the bottom menu, and these fields then become editable for me. So I can choose a different specific organism type if need be, or if you needed to add another component, you can add a row here if you're going to track on C. difficile and you're also going to track on MRSA, for instance. You could add a row and then add MRSA here. You'll also notice that this makes this checkbox here at the top a live option now, which allows you to basically rescind your reporting plan for the month by indicating that you don't plan to follow any of the long-term care component modules for that particular month. We don't expect that you'll be using that while you're a part of this initiative, but do know that that's available. So if you haven't entered a monthly report, I should note, always, you're going to be clicking Save when you're done making changes. But this is a good opportunity for me to show you if you hadn't entered a reporting plan for the month in question, from the reporting plan we would go to Add. And right now, because I did make changes on this page, if I click Add, I didn't make enough changes apparently. I apologize. Let me try that again. We'll do Find. We'll do October. We'll edit, add a row. We'll select MRSA. And now if I were to click out, I would get this notification that asks me, are you sure that you want to leave this page? Because I made changes and I didn't save them. In this case, I'm not interested in saving them, so I'm going to say that we can go ahead and leave the page. But I just wanted to demonstrate to you that there are checks and balances within the system to help you remember to click Save or Submit depending on the page that you're on. So if you hadn't entered a monthly reporting plan for the month in question, this is where you would go. So you would select Reporting Plan from the left-hand menu, and again, then you would click Add from that sub-menu. And you can add the information for your reporting plan. First, you would select the appropriate month and year. And then you would move to the center of the page, and under Lab ID Event Module, the default will be FAC-wide in, and you actually can't change it because Lab ID events are always facility-wide for long-term care facilities. And the specific organism type would be C. difficile. And when you select that, the checkbox over here auto-populates. You want to leave that checked. And then you would click the Save button at the bottom. I also wanted to demonstrate to you, in this case, we already reviewed the October 2016 reporting plan. We know it already exists. If I didn't know that and I attempted to enter a new reporting plan for October 2016 by selecting October and 2016 from the drop-down list, the page will automatically take me to the reporting plan that I've already submitted. So this is another way that you can essentially find your reporting plan if you know that you've already submitted it. Any questions about the monthly reporting plans? Do we have any questions in the chat box, Annette?
There are no questions.
Thank you. All right. So now it's time to enter your monthly data and any events that you have, which would be positive C. difficile tests. Note that lab ID events can be entered anytime during the month as long as the corresponding monthly reporting plan has been submitted. Similar to the boxes that we've seen that have popped up thus far, if you were to attempt to enter a C. difficile case but you hadn't submitted a reporting plan, you would get an error alert letting you know that you needed to submit a reporting plan first. We do encourage you, whenever possible, to submit your C. difficile lab ID events as they come up. That will help you in the long run in terms of the time it takes to complete your reporting. But you can also submit them all at once if that works better for your process. So, when collecting data for the lab ID events, you're going to want to refer to the lab ID event protocol, which we discussed. And as we also discussed, the long-term care facility page for C. difficile includes a template form to assist in your data collection. So if your facility doesn't have a process in place to capture the necessary surveillance information, you can use that form, and we encourage you to refer to the related table of instructions that's provided as well. We're going to walk through two examples today of C. difficile lab ID events. One in which we're reporting an event for a resident who's never had a previous event entered into the system, and another for a resident that has had a reportable event in the past. So to start, you're going to select Event from the left-hand menu and select Add from the Event submenu. We're going to start by entering the patient demographics, or the resident demographics in this case. So first you're going to start off with a resident ID. A resident ID needs to be a unique number that stays with that specific resident. So for example, a medical record number or a resident number. You should not use a room number or a bed number because these change over time and are not attributable to an individual person. So in this case, we're going to enter an event for a resident ID 8538552, which is made up a number. You can tab through this form or you can click into the next field, whichever you'd like to do. In this case, the resident has never had a case entered before, so we're going to see a message that lets us know the resident couldn't be found, but that we can directly enter the new resident from this screen. So we'll click OK. The next field is asking for Social Security number. Remember that NHSN is a secure database, but if there are concerns or the person entering the data doesn't have access to resident Social Security numbers, you can use 9s in the place of the actual SSN. And so in this case, I'm going to use the 9. So 999, 99, 9999. It is a required field because it's marked with an asterisk, so you can't bypass it. If you don't have the Social Security number available, enter 9s. You'll see that the names are optional fields. You don't have to put them in, but you can put them in. In this case, our resident is going to be Hattie Johnson. So we'll put Hattie in here. Hattie is a female, and she was born on, this always bundles me up. Yep. This little area gets a little bit tricky to navigate, so pardon me while I fumble through here. If you can use the field to the calendar option here on the right, it does make it easier to enter a particular date, but for the date of birth, that gets a little bit clunky because your date of birth isn't usually very recent. So we're going to say that Hattie was born on May 4th, 1942. Hattie is non-Hispanic white. Again, the ethnicity and race are optional fields. And then we'll move into some more resident information. So first is resident type. which your options are short-term stay or long-term stay. Short-term stay is 100 days or less since admission, long-term being 100 days or more, and in this case, Hattie is a long-stay patient. The first admission date to the facility is the admission date when the resident has stayed in the facility without 30 or more consecutive days away. So if the resident has left the facility for more than 30 days, you're going to be entering their date of return for their first admission to facility. So in this case, Hattie's first date of admission was, we're going to say that she was admitted in July of 2015, say on the 16th. The date of current admission is the most recent date of return if the patient has left the facility for more than 2 consecutive days since admission. If the resident has not left the facility for 2 or more consecutive days, then this would be the same as the date of first admission. So in this case, in our example, Hattie was in the hospital at the beginning of the month for pain, and she returned to the facility on October 10th of 2016. Any questions about the demographic info at all? So from here, we'll move into the lab ID event information, which is just scrolling down the screen. So for event type, we're going to choose lab identified MDRO or CDI event, and that's going to pop up a bunch of other fields that we're going to submit information into. So the date that the specimen was collected, again, you can click on that little calendar icon there to be able to fill this in. In this case, we're looking at October 25th, 2016 being the date that the specimen was collected. The specific organism type is going to be C. diff. And then the specimen body site and the specimen source will auto-populate. Don't change those. Resident care location, we're going to say that Hattie was in 1 North. Again, your facility is not going to have all of these options. You're only going to see the locations that you have mapped within your facility's profile. So you may only have 1, you may have a few, but you certainly won't have 27. Primary resident service type, we're going to say that Hattie was a general nursing or long-term general nursing patient. You can also choose from these other options here. Remember we said that Hattie was readmitted to the facility on the 10th after a short stay in the hospital. So this question is, has the resident been transferred from an acute care facility in the past 4 weeks? Our answer is yes. The date of that transfer was her readmission date, which was October 10th. Whoops, wrong one. And it asks, if yes, was the resident on antibiotic therapy for this specific organism at the time of transfer? We're going to say, in this case, Hattie was not on an antibiotic treatment. So this field down here regarding colonization, previous infection or colonization, is actually for NHSN internal use only. You may see that this field will get populated by NHSN. They will take care of that when appropriate. And then down here, custom fields and comments. These are both optional fields that your facility can use internally if they would like to. These are not used or evaluated by NHSN. So as always, after I've submitted information, I want to click Save at the bottom. And then the screen is refreshed so I can enter a new event if I would like to at this point. So I just want to show you what happens if you enter an event for a resident who already exists within the facility profile. So in this case, our resident ID is 9528533. And if I click tab or if I click into the Social Security number field, you'll see that information pops up because John Smith had a previous case of some sort that I entered from this facility into NHSN, and so his demographic information has already been captured for me. You can see his Social Security number would have populated as his own if I hadn't used 9s. His name, his gender, ethnicity, and race, his date of first admission to the facility. We still need to say what type of resident he is, and in this case, he's a long-term stay patient. And his date of current admission to the facility, because you would need to indicate whether he had left the facility or not. In this case, we're going to say that he didn't, that he's been in the facility since he was admitted on October 12th of 2015. Once we get down into the event type, we're going to choose again the specimen collection date. So in this case, we'll say that the specimen was collected on the 25th of October. So organism type, C. difficile. Again, your specimen source and system are going to be auto-populated. Resident care location, we'll say that he was in 1 West. This is also a general nursing unit. John has not been transferred from a hospital in the last 4 weeks, so we're going to select no. And again, this field here is going to be auto-populated by NHSN as appropriate. And these custom fields and comments are available for your use if your facility chooses to use them. So I'll click Save. And we'll have now entered 2 lab ID events for the month of October. So before we go on to the final steps, are there any questions about entering lab ID events? Okay. So in just a few steps, we'll have completed our data submission for the month. Each month, the facility needs to enter monthly summary data, including resident admissions, resident days, and number of resident admissions on C. difficile treatment. This data must be submitted each month regardless of whether the facility has a CDI lab ID event to report or not. If the facility does not have any cases to report, it must indicate so on the monthly summary data submission. So when collecting the monthly summary data, you'll want to refer to the instructions for completion of the long-term care facility component denominators form, which the table of instructions is again located on that NHSN long-term care facility webpage we reviewed. The page also includes a template form. Again, you don't need to use that template form if you already have a process in place for capturing the necessary surveillance information. One thing to note is that if you do choose to use that form, it also includes columns related to tracking for urinary tract infections. You do not need to track on those columns if you're only planning to report for C. difficile. So to submit our summary data, we're going to click on Summary Data from the left-hand menu, and then we're going to select Add from that submenu. You're going to select the appropriate month and year from the drop-down menu here. Remember that I'm in a test facility, so as it happens, someone's already entered monthly summary data for October 2016. So if I were to select those from the drop-down menu here, data that was submitted would auto-populate on the screen, and I would be able to make edits to it if necessary by selecting Edit from the bottom of the screen there. So let's go back, and I'm going to select again Add from the Summary Data submenu, and we're just going to bypass that month and year option for the time being. So what you're going to be entering is found under the MDRO and CDI lab event reporting section that's found here in the middle of the screen. I'm going to scroll over just a little, and actually I'm going to make my screen just slightly smaller, make it a little bit more difficult to see, but I want you to be able to see where the C. difficile box is here. So in these boxes in the middle is where you're going to enter your resident admissions for the month, which is the total resident admissions across each day of the month added together, the resident days for the month, and the total number of admissions on C. difficile treatment. After you've entered that information, you're going to click on the C. difficile, under the C. difficile column under Lab ID Events, All Specimens. If you didn't have any events to report, you would click on this box here to show that you didn't have any events to report for the month. And then once you're finished, you would click Save at the bottom. The final step in the process is to check to see if you have any alerts that need to be resolved. So let me make the screen larger again here. You'll see any alerts that you have when you first log into NHSN, but you can also get back to that page by clicking Alerts from the left-hand menu. See here, I'm getting this notice that I've entered information on this page, but I haven't saved it, so this is a nice little catch for you if you happen to forget to click Save. Again, I don't want to save the information, so I'm going to click Leave this page. And then when you select alerts, you're taken back to the screen that you landed on when you first entered your facility's profile. If I had any alerts, they would appear in this screen. And so actually right now what I'm going to do is stop sharing my screen and go back to the slide deck, because we have an example here. So looking at this screen, you can see that in this case, there were 2 missing summaries. So someone had gone in for the facility and either entered case information for the facility, or maybe the reporting period had lapsed and they hadn't entered their summary data for those months. And so if they were to click on this hyperlink under the number 2, it would direct them to what needs to be done in order to resolve those alerts. So this is another way that NHSN is helping you to make sure that you are entering all of the information that you need to. And then, once you've done that, we would say congratulations, because you've completed your data entry for the month. So real quickly, I just want to remind you of the upcoming events, and then we'll open up the lines for questions and encourage you to actually log into your facilities profile and enter any data that you have with you today. But as a reminder, we do have a virtual learning lab scheduled for December and January. In December, we'll be submitting the November data. In January, we'll be submitting the December data. Links to register are available on the slide. And I'm going to leave up these state-specific contacts available for you if you run into questions along the way. But what I'd like to do now is open up the line for questions and then encourage you to submit any data that you have along with you. We have a number of folks on the line who are available to provide technical assistance and help you navigate protocols, or if it helps for me to pull up the demo site again to go through some clicks, I'm happy to do that. So if we could open up the line for any questions.
Thank you. We will now begin the question and answer session. If you have a question, please press star then 1 on your touch-tone phone. If you wish to be removed from the queue, please press the pound sign or the hash key. There will be a delay before the first question is announced. If you're using a speakerphone, you may need to pick up the handset first before pressing the numbers. Once again, if you have a question, please press star 1 on your touch-tone phone. And we have Allison online with a question.
Oh, yes, I had a question about how long do we have to report for the previous month? Is there a specific date that we have to report by?
Well, I can tell you, Allison, this is Sarah. So we've had a lot of discussion about that internally, because this is essentially a voluntary project that you're a part of. CMS has not set any deadlines for data submission for long-term care facilities at this point. Hospitals do have deadlines for submissions that are usually done on a quarterly basis. For the purposes of this initiative, we are asking that you make every attempt to get your data in by the end of the following month. Each state is going to be taking a different approach to checking your data and reaching out to provide you support and make sure that you get your data submitted. So the best option is to connect with your state contact to find out what their expectations are.
Thank you. I did have one other question.
Yes.
We are a long-term, also a post-acute care facility. Am I reporting on everyone in the facility or just specifically the long-term care population?
That's a great question. I'm going to ask if either Janet or Diane have an answer to that.
This is Diane from Wisconsin. It would depend on how your facility is labeled. If you are considered an SNF or a SNF, then you will report on everyone.
We are considered a SNF.
Okay. So you will report on all residents within your facility. You may want to consider making those two separate locations if that works for you by floors or units so that you can keep it separate, if that's helpful.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your questions. Thanks, Diane.
Our following question.
Go ahead.
We have Benita online with a question.
Yes, I came in a little late, and I wanted to know can you show us how to get back to our specific, on the site for our location? How do we print the slide also?
So, I'm sorry, Denise, are you looking to log in to NHSN? Is that where you're?
Yes, how to log in to, do the report.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to share my screen again. And I am going to log out and close out these tabs here. So, if I were to type in sam.cdc.gov and enter, oh, I have to log out here too. I apologize. So many things to log out from. Okay. So, Denise, stop me if I'm going over something that you're not interested in, okay? So from the SAM's login page, you're going to select under SAM's grid card that login option. Once you have your grid card, this is how you will always log in to SAM's.
Okay.
So you'll select login under the SAM's grid card. Then you'll enter your SAM's username, which is your email address that you set up your account under, and your password. And then under SAM's grid card again, this is where you'll enter for your grid card credentials by using the letter number combinations across the columns and the rows to identify the appropriate, kind of like a decoder, like when you were a kid and you had a decoder from your cereal box or Cracker Jack box, I guess maybe. So in this case, I'm looking for column C, row 3, column H, row 4, and column I, row 2 on my grid card specifically, not on the grid card that's at the top of the screen, on the grid card that you have in your hand.
Okay.
And then log in. Once you reach the My Application screen, you will likely see more than one option. You probably will see more than what I have here. You'll have the option likely to enroll a facility. If your facility is already fully enrolled, you don't have to select that ever again unless you're enrolling another facility. So you're always going to choose NHSN reporting. And then again, your screen is going to look slightly different from mine. Denise, do you have just one facility that you have access to? Oh, maybe I lost Denise. If you have access to only one facility, your facility should be defaulted. If you have access to more than one facility, you'll need to choose from the drop-down list which one you're interested in accessing.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yes. And is there any way that we could print the slides out?
Absolutely, absolutely. So the slides are available. I will copy and paste the link again into the chat box. The other thing that is available is our new CDI reporting guide. All of that information is available on the CDI webpage, but I'll post links to the specific items. The reporting guide is put together in more of a narrative and image format, whereas the slides are really just the images, so you may find that the guide is more useful in terms of walking you step by step through the process.
Okay.
Other questions?
We have no further questions at this time.
Is anyone attempting to enter their data right now? You're probably too busy doing it to tell me that you are. right. Well, for what it's worth, I'm going to stay on the line for the next 5 or so minutes while folks are working on their data submission. If you have questions as you're processing through that, please do queue yourself up. It's *1, is that correct?
Correct. And we have Lisa online with a question.
Great, thank you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. So we're in and we're trying to submit our data, and when I put in the reporting plan, I put it in for October. So this is going to sound like a silly question.
No.
Is that October data or is that September data?
It's October data.
Okay.
Yep.
So then I should be fine because I got the alerts that the Octobers were not done, obviously, because it's November.
Yep. Yep.
And I can report for CDIP in October, correct?
Correct.
And does it have to start as of October 16th, or can we use the whole month?
You would use the whole month. We would expect that you would be submitting data for the entire month of October, both in terms of any lab ID events that you have, as well as the summary data that you submit.
Perfect. That's all I have.
Great question. Thank you.
Sarah, do you know if it'll let you submit data for a month that isn't completed yet? Will it even let you do that?
You will be allowed to submit data lab ID events for a month that isn't completed yet. So say you complete your submission for October and you say, oh, well, we had 2 cases the beginning of November. I'm going to go ahead and enter those. As long as you've submitted your monthly reporting plan for November, you can go in and enter the lab ID events for the month. You won't be able to enter the summary data until you wouldn't want to enter the summary data until the end of the month.
Okay.
Good question.
And Sarah, I just had another question.
Yeah.
So could you go, if it's not too hard, go to that summary page?
The summary data page?
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Do we want to add?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, see where it says under denominators for long-term care locations? Do we not fill that out ever?
No, we're only using the MDRO and CDI lab event reporting section here.
Okay.
These are actually used for the urinary catheters.
UTI.
Yep, that's for UTIs.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. So again, we'll be on the line here. If folks have questions, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen so I can see if anything comes up in chat, but we're available to share screens again if needed. I'll stay on the line a couple minutes past the hour as well, just in case anything does come up. But in the meantime, your state-specific contacts are listed there on the screen if you want to reach out for additional support. And when you close out of today's webinar, please do complete the evaluation so we can use your feedback to improve our future offerings. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This concludes today's conference. Thank you for participating. You may now disconnect.